Hi there, this is Jim the Keys bartender coming to you live from Monroe County. And I did a live show on Extras. This is on the Keys Bartender Extra yesterday called Don't Panic. And since then, the models have updated and got us into further into the cone. The hurricane is expected to hit at around 130 miles per hour wind speed with a wind field of over 90 miles from the center, maybe 100 something miles. No guarantee whether it's going to hit Florida yet. There's still models that say it could make a right turn because it's slowing down instead of hitting on early late Sunday. They're talking about hitting on Monday, but we should start feeling the effects even down here. I don't know. It could go north. It could slow down. That's the reason why it's so difficult to guess whether you're going to evacuate. Where you're going to evacuate to. If you go up to Central Florida, you could be going right into the bullseye of it. And we did discuss that yesterday. Right now in the Keys, though, if it does come down to the Keys, then you're pretty much stuck. If it God forbid, we're going to hit North Key Largo. That's our tether to the mainland. And we don't know how the overseas highway will handle it right there. The stretch, we call it. There's two roads. There's actually a Cardsound Road that comes in, too. But it's a little too close to call right now. And obviously, as you get closer, then you have a more compressed time frame for evacuation, then you'd have thousands of people trying to leave at the same time. So take that with a grain of salt. The people down here, I guess it looks like there's two categories. There's new people down here, and I'm not quite new because I've been at least through Irma and a couple other close calls, but there's people that have been through all of them. They've been here since Donna in the 60s. I hesitate to say there could be a couple that have been here since the worst hurricane that ever hit the United States, which would be the Labor Day hurricane in 1935, which was the strongest hurricane with winds over 180 miles per hour. It's about 20 miles per hour greater than Andrew, or 20 miles per hour greater than Andrew. And we have photographic records, in-depth photographic records of what that did to modern architecture in Homestead, and after it hit. And so I could imagine what would it have been like if we had that 180 going through here. Now the danger of Dorian, I'm not going to focus on Dorian the whole time. We're going to go cover a little history of hurricanes in Florida, but the real danger of Dorian is that it's a slow mover. So once it hits land, it's going to drop. The wind speeds will probably drop to under 100 miles an hour in a little while and just kind of meander through either straight across if it hits in Florida or turn north and take its way from going up all the center place. So the worst case scenario, I guess, if it hits the far southern point and just meanders up the whole state, right up the center. There's a possibility it could go across and get in the Gulf Stream. And for some reason, they say, in the Gulf of Mexico, they say that is not a problem in strengthening once it hits there again. But I don't see how it wouldn't, because the waters are just as warm in the Gulf of Mexico. But I guess that's the reason why they're experts and I'm not. So here we are once again, not knowing exactly what to do, not doing what we can. I got my water, I got some canned food. Tomorrow morning, I'll take a look and start putting up the shutters. But if you look back, it was they started being really serious about keeping records and being methodical about it. It was 1851. And I didn't think they started naming hurricanes until late 1940s. And then, but since 1851, there had been 500 tropical and subtropical cyclones in Florida. And since 1851, there's only been 18 seasons where there hasn't been any subtropical or tropical cyclone activity in Florida. So that's 18 seasons. The last season they didn't have a tropical cyclone activity in Florida was 1967, over 52 years ago. Now, the first flights that they started putting into there was 1943, and that's flights that's prior to satellite imagery, but that's where they started collecting data and were able to go in and come back. And since it is slow moving, most hurricanes move anywhere from 9 miles per hour forward up to like 14, 15. It could probably go even faster. Since keeping records, since 1926, Monroe County had the most hurricanes of any county in the United States, and that's 26 hurricanes. Now, the hurricane season starts in May and ends late October, November, but the earliest hurricane to hit on record that's recognized right now is June 9th, and that was Hurricane Irma, and the latest one was Kate, and that was November 21st. Now, there was a cyclone, but they didn't keep really good records back in 1863, May 28th, so that would technically be this earliest hurricane to hit, but they didn't know the magnitude or where it hit and all that stuff, because a lot of Florida in 1863, it was Key West and northern Florida, with the central Florida being less populated. Now, as I said, the strongest one by far of any hurricane was the Labor Day hurricane, and it was reached. They used barometric pressure to measure the strength of it, and it was 893 millibars, and the rest of the hurricanes were in the 900s. Of the 10 most intense hurricanes that hit the United States, 4 of them were in Florida. The first recorded one was by a Spanish. The Spanish lost 2 of their, I guess it could have been treasure fleet, back in 1523. I'm sure it happened before then, but the native population didn't have an oral tradition. They didn't have a written tradition, so there was no record of it. So, and as I said, the last year of activity was with no cyclonic activity was 1967, 52 years ago. So, we take a look. 1851, I guess they started keeping really good records, and prior to then, they may have noticed. People may have noticed that when the barometric pressure, because they had barometers long before then, but they didn't know exactly what it meant. So I'm just contemplating. Nowadays we have satellite imagery. We track disturbances coming off the West African coast or developing in the Caribbean, and they have the satellite imagery, and they can see exactly the tropical wave, and they can see the formation of an eye, and they can get the intensity. And now we have the hurricane flights going in there from NOAA and the National Weather Center and the U.S. Air Force, and they're tracking all the wind speed, movement, the barometric pressure. But prior to that, just imagine this. You have an oral tradition, you're a native population in the United States, and even in prior to, after we're settled, you just knew that in the summer, from late mid-spring on to mid-fall, that there was a possibility of having intense storms. They didn't know exactly what it was. I guess it was akin to thunderstorms for people hundreds and hundreds of years ago, not knowing exactly prior to the electrical experiments of Benjamin Franklin. I'm sure they knew that was a climatic thing of in the 1700s, the 1600s. But just think about the 12th century, 13th century, 14th century. Every time prior, when you hear a thunderstorm, when you say, "What the fuck is that?" And in these tropical areas, we have monsoons and hurricanes. They see a storm. Right now, outside my window, I'll take a picture. I'll probably post it with the thing. We're having rain and thunderstorm right now. It's not part of Dorian. It's just this tropical system that's in the area, and it was threatening us prior to that. We knew that was going to come. The hurricanes are just like one of these things that just kind of show up. But I can just imagine years ago what it would be like. All of a sudden you think, well, okay, we know every so often there's a storm coming in, and 1 out of 100 of them or 1 out of 50 of them, they just don't end. They just increase. And chances are there was a bigger hurricane that a more powerful one that has hit the area in the last hundreds and hundreds of years or thousands of years since the humans have been living in this area or along the southeast coast. And they just go, what the fuck? What is this? And they, there'd be a sage saying something like, well, every so often during these storms, you'll just see them build up. And they're not prepared for it. How would you know you're prepared for it? Most of the time, you get a storm, you say, oh, well, this is going to happen. We don't know what causes it and stuff like that, but it's going to rain a lot. It could get a little intense, could get windy. Sometimes it could be high winds, but sometimes it gets really intense, and it goes on for a day, pounding you. In this area, since it's not like the southwestern part of the United States where people built using adobe or building inside of cliffs or anything, any serious structure. Just think of it, the way they used to build these their shelters. You're taking your family and you say, well, it's going to get you whatever, it's a deerskin hide or other animal hide, and you use it for your shelter. Or you have a tiki set up. That's definitely not going to withstand 100 mile per hour winds, and no matter what kind of structure you use. The log structures are very strong, but even they can be breached by high-powered winds. So these people dealt with it for years. They had through their oral traditions that sometimes, every so often, there's a bad one. They just don't know when it's going to come. And then Westerners showed up, some of their technology, and you had barometers and things like that. And Key West was the largest city in Florida. And Key West, as I said, Monroe County was the most affected by hurricanes of any county in the United States. Key West and Pensacola were the two most affected cities in all of Florida and probably in all the United States. They'd have these people, it'd be the 1840s, 1830s, and they knew there were some powerful storms coming when that barometric pressure dropped. And the more that it dropped, the more serious. And then you had the meteorologists telling people, and they had to explain to people because they weren't exactly sure of the science. But they said, listen, we know when this pressure drops, that something's going on and we're going to get hit by a storm. And they'd only have maybe an hour or two notice to see it right in front of the storm. They start seeing the pressure dropping, going through dropping through the floor and coming in, and they'd have to go out and explain to people, we got to do our best to seek shelter. We got to clear the coast. We got to hit high ground. And back then, like I guess it was only a little better. If you think of the wooden structures they had, I'm sure they had some stone, there's not a lot of stone down here, so a lot of it was wood. So they'd have to, if they get affected by something greater than 100, 125, 130 mile per hour wind, they were up shit's creek too. They didn't know a lot about wind shear and things like that for roofs. So you just have to, they would just get their warning. Nowadays we have the option of evacuating, but once again, we're talking about time. So we're going to find out, we'll probably get a lead time of 24 hours, and even then there's no guarantee. Like in Andrew, and that was in the 80s, people thought the Keys were going to be the point it hit, and it actually went north and went onto the mainland. It still affected the Keys, especially Ocean Reef, but a lot of people that went off the Keys seeking shelter would have fared better if they stayed. But then again, that's an equation you'd have to come up. It's a personal one, especially when you have family. When you're a single guy, I would probably just hang there like a dummy. But we have our plans here. The structure I have, I don't think it would fare too well in 130 mile per hour winds. So we'd probably seek it in a shelter in my brother-in-law's place in Tavernier, if that isn't the center. But he seemed to fare well during Irma, never lost power. So that's probably, if it did jute here and we couldn't evacuate, we would go there and bring as many supplies as we can that contribute. So for now, just remember, we are fortunate that we have information. We do have satellite imagery. We do have the hurricane flights going in there. And for my listeners, we'll probably be doing. I'm hoping. I know it seems a little crazy and stuff. I'm still hoping to do the podcast down in Key West on Tuesday from the smallest bar and from Key West Smugglers. It depends on what they're thinking right now. But if it does, we'll find out tomorrow and Sunday what's the likelihood of it going north. They are looking right now at going to hit West Palm Beach. And so with West Palm Beach, we're about 115 miles away from there. So if it did hit there, we'd be outside the tropical storm force winds by a hair. And if it goes a little north, it's not. And you know what? I do not wish any destruction on any, just for the sake of escaping it. I hope the place it does hit is prepared. And I hope they do take seriously. But like I said, panicking is not the answer. We just have to make a logical decision, an informed decision, so that you're not moving into a higher risk area. You're not going to move from a place where you're safer to a place you're less safer. And then there's always the panic of not being able to, afterwards, when you've made it through, then it's, having to get back. That's probably the most stressful part of the hurricane, because when you're in the hurricane, you hear it. It's surreal. You hear the winds. It's hit. It's pounding. I remember seeing Irma. I was up in Lakeland, and you're just waiting. You're waiting to see if anything breaks. If you hear a big boom or anything like that, is it breaching your walls or your roof? Is your family safe? But then when it's over, you have this thing about your property and your belongings. But I know it's a big investment in your life. I know your home and all your items are important, but it's not as important as your life and especially the life of your family, your pets. Those mementos, Jesus Christ, if you're on a ship, are you going to grab them? If it's going down, no, you should grab a life preserver. And grab one for your... don't be like Kate Winslet in the Titanic and hog up that whole piece of furniture where she could have been on it with Leonardo DiCaprio. Just you bring people with you, save as many people as you can. And I'm not saying, hey, like I said, that thing could stall and go north and not even touch land. It can go off the edge, cause a lot of damage off the coast. Yes, it could cause a lot of damage, but not nearly as much damage when it comes in. But we don't know it right now. So for now, I just want you to know I'm going to keep everything. I'll be doing daily updates for our listeners, and hopefully we'll be able to call it a close call, and that the affected, there'll be minimum damage, a minimum lives affected, and that's to keep an eye out on something and be hopeful. That is not being negligent or hiding or sticking your head in the sand. It's just doing that. It's not panicking, being able to make the right decision when you have to, and that's what we're here for. So thank you for now. This is the Keys Bartender signing out.